Confessions of a Spanish Teacher, Part 21, Chapter 41. I believe in angels. Creo en los angelitos. Belief is a strange thing. If you truly believe in something, does that make it true? People have such different beliefs, and many people are truly convinced that their particular beliefs are the truth, especially as far as religion is concerned. I'm not a fan of religion, especially exclusive religions that declare themselves to be somehow chosen and more special than everybody else. I watch a lot of true crime videos, and you can be certain that the killer will be the God-fearing, church-going family person 9 times out of 10. However, I can see the point of it. It can unite people and it can offer solace and comfort. As long as it is a tolerant religion and not hypocritical, I can respect it. And as long as I'm not expected to blindly follow it. So I consider myself spiritual but not religious and respectful of everybody else's choices. Certain things have happened to me in life that have convinced me that a higher power exists. Though I lose belief sometimes and I have to remind myself. This story is one such experience. My mother suffered from vascular dementia. She had a series of strokes after the death of my father, and she became progressively worse. One such time I set off to visit her, travelling to the UK by car so I could travel around when I was there, and also as I hate flying. My son was almost 7 years old. It was just the two of us. The journey there was a dream. No problems. We stayed overnight in a truck stop in Cahors, France. Me, my son, and about 50 French lorry drivers. I would definitely recommend those kinds of places. Really good value and fantastic food. My experiences in France have never been particularly good, to be honest, but this was one of the better ones. On arrival at Dover, we set off to Reading for the birthday party of a friend and had a great few days. We then carried on to Manchester to visit my mum as she was in hospital. This too, funnily enough, was enjoyable, spending quite a lot of time with my mum on the ward. My son was the darling of the other old ladies, helping a lady with only one arm and one leg to open things, and not batting an eyelid at some of the unladylike sitting positions of the other ladies. He helped me brush my mum's false teeth and wash her hair, and it was so sad when the few days were up. Although my mum, she was away with the fairies by then, she did come back enough to say, I don't want you to go. As I explained to her that we had to go back to Spain. This broke my heart, as I knew in my heart I would never see her again. I just felt it. She was so frail and confused. I'm just glad that we did get that little bit of time together. Off we went, stopping overnight again at my friend's in Reading, then back on the ferry to return to Spain from Calais. We arrived in Calais with €120 in cash, my credit cards, and mobile phone. I didn't have much petrol, and I considered finding somewhere straight away, but I figured as I was travelling on the toll roads, there were bound to be plenty of petrol stations, right? Wrong. Word of wisdom, though it may have changed now, but there were no petrol stations for ages and ages. These were the days before Google. Now you could just Google the nearest one and come off the motorway. But I was too scared to come off the motorway and get lost or run out of petrol. I took an executive decision and I stopped at one of those SOS phones to phone for help and not take the chance of running out of petrol too far from a phone and having to walk with my son along the motorway. My telephone was not working. I had no signal. It must have been when roaming wasn't as easy as it is now, though I don't know what it's like now. No telephones had WhatsApp or internet then. I can't complain about the speed that the guy arrived. He was there within 10 minutes with a can of petrol. 120 euros. Shit, an expensive tank of petrol. Never mind, I thought I'll pay by card. Card didn't work. Double shit. During that trip home, France was like the Twilight Zone. Nothing worked. Phone, credit card, debit card. I had 120 euros in cash, and that was all I had. And I was just beginning my journey, really. I had to pay tolls. I had to get more petrol and pay for a stayover somewhere. What could I do? Do you have another card? He asked. I was about to say no, and then I remembered I did have not the card, but the card details of an ex-boyfriend of mine. This, like everything in my life, is a long story. Basically, this was a guy I had a relationship with many years ago when I lived in Reading, but we were still in touch. He now lived in Gibraltar. Earlier that year, he'd invited my son and I to stay with him in Seville for a couple of days, and he'd given me the card details to book the hotel. To cut a long story short, it turned out that he had a different idea about that trip than I did, and I had left early after barricading him out of the hotel room. We had not spoken since, just to update that we are still friends now. But this is many years later. But at that point, we hadn't spoken since that trip to Seville. I gave the card details to the guy on the roadside. I had the card number, expiry date, and security code. I told him it was not my card and I didn't have the card himself, but he said no problem. I think he was just glad to get paid and get home. So the relief when that payment processed was palpable for both of us. I knew my ex-friend wouldn't be happy. But what else could I do? I would make it right later. So we set off again. I was rushing a little as I wanted to get over the border to Spain before it got dark, and this had taken up time. I planned to stop somewhere then, presuming my phone and card would start working again over the border. An hour later, the traffic gendarmerie pulled me over for speeding. Triple shit. Any of you live in Spain and think the Guardia are tough? They have nothing on this lot for nastiness. Maybe it's the language barriers. My French is not very good. It was better before I learnt Spanish, but they were just plain nasty. I just think if you're dealing with a woman who's obviously upset with a 7-year-old boy in the car, you could at least be a bit nicer no matter what nationality they were. The fine was 120 euros and I had to pay it there and then in cash. I tried to explain that that was literally everything I had. My phone was not working, my cards were not working, and I would not have enough money to stay over anywhere or even get to Spain, whereas I was sure I could at least ring someone for help or my cards would work again. They weren't interested. I think their exact words in broken English were, "You no pay, you stay here." Maybe my hysterical crying did rub off a little bit as they eventually said, "Oh, well, follow us." I presumed they were going to take us to the police station or something. I just couldn't face it. I had to get home. I had work the day after next. I gave them the money and I set off again, hoping I at least had enough petrol to get over the border to Spain and travelling on the A roads instead of the motorway to avoid the tolls. I drove through the night. My son slept through it all, luckily. I was getting more and more anxious. Petrol was going down and down, and I was getting tired, but I didn't want to stop as I was scared. It was the early hours of the morning. I prayed. Suddenly, a service station loomed up, one of those quite big ones that you come across on roads where many people travel. I don't remember where it was, but it was in France. It was not far from the border, but still in France. I had to go to the toilet, so I woke up my son and in we went. It was deserted and really eerie, just us and the person behind the counter, which I don't even remember if it was a man or a woman. It was a massive service station and there were loads of loos, none of which were occupied. So we went into maybe one of maybe 30 or even 50 choices. I could have gone into any of those toilets, but I chose that one. On the cistern, looking at me, was a small red Radley change purse. Radley has a Scotty dog motif, doesn't it, on the front? In that purse was a €50 note and a couple of euros in change. No cards, no ID, literally that was it. That's why I believe in angels. I bought some petrol and continued over the border into Spain, where everything worked once more. My phone, my cards, I have never felt so much relief as I arrived in my beloved adopted country. That was the first time I knew Spain really was my home, and I'm meant to be here for better or worse. France, forget it. To be continued.